Good evening to all our friends in Israel and good day to our friends in the U.S. and all over the world. My name is Ruby Shamir and I'm the Executive Director of AIFL, America-Israel Friendship League in Israel. AIFL has launched its first webinar long before COVID-19, more than a year ago, highlighting Bereshit, Israel's satellite that reached the moon. Over 2 months ago, we launched Friends in Deeds as a campaign to connect Americans and Israelis during these unusual times as a virtual community building opportunity. We have hosted webinars twice a week that have included opera, culinary classes, yoga, and Pilates, as well as how Israeli startup companies and emergency medical professionals are dealing with trauma and the health crisis of COVID-19. Today, our Friends Indeed series continues with a different conversation generated by women. I'm happy to be your host in this inaugural webinar, starting a dynamic new series of conversation between Israeli and American iconic women icons. The series will highlight what we have in common and what we can learn from each other. The AIFL has brought to Israel throughout the years many leadership delegations from all walks of life. Among those delegations, we have brought numerous women's leadership delegations. The participants were American women of remarkable achievements. Among the participants in the 2019 delegation was Meredith Jacobs, CEO of Jewish Women International, JWI, the organization with whom we are happy to partner on this series. Meredith is an award-winning journalist and former editor-in-chief of the Washington Jewish Week. She is also an author of several books. Among other activities, Meredith was the host of the radio shows Connecting Family and Modern Jewish Mom. For everyone on this call, wherever, either on Zoom or on Facebook, please use your chat function to tell us where you're calling from, and feel free to send us your questions for the panelists throughout the webcast, and we will try to get to as many as possible. For everyone on Facebook, please turn on Watch Party so other friends can join live as well. Meredith, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ruby. You know, it's so hard to imagine, especially with our sense of time these days, but it was exactly 1 year ago today that I was in Israel with AIFL on the Women of Influence mission. I have to say it was one of the most profound experiences of my life. The amazing women leaders from the U.S. I was honored to travel with, but also the inspiring women of Israel we were introduced to. It felt like day after day, every meeting, every moment was so powerful and connected me so deeply to Israel through the lens of women's leadership. And I remember returning and thinking, how can we bring that experience to more women? And that became the inspiration for today's webinar. For those of you who are new to my organization, Jewish Women International is a 123-year-old Jewish women's organization with a mission to build a world in which all women may thrive. We work every day to end violence against women and girls, build access to long-term economic security, and connect highly accomplished women as mentors and role models to the next generation of women leaders. And I invite you to learn more about our work at jwi.org. And now I'd like to briefly introduce our esteemed panel. In a moment when all of our communities, workplaces, industries, lives have been upended by this devastating virus, these three leaders have innovated, adapted, and to use what may be the word of the year, pivoted in the face of the pandemic. Elah Alkalay is Vice President of Business Development for IBI, one of the largest investment houses in Israel. She is the board chair of IBI Mutual Fund Management and founder of Invest in Yourself, an IBI investment advisor forum for women. She also serves as chair of the Israel Women's Network, working to promote gender equity in Israel. Wendy Feldman Block is an award-winning commercial real estate executive with Savills, where she serves as a senior managing director. She advises tenants in the Washington, D.C. metro area, leveraging market intelligence to structure transactions that align with an organization's operational goals. She's passionate about wellness in the workplace and was actually the first broker in the world to advise a client on achieving both WELL and LEED Platinum certifications. And in 2018, JWI named her a woman to watch. And finally, Allison Fine, candidate for Congress in the U.S. House of Representatives, looking to fill the seat long held by Nita Lowey. Allison is a pioneer in the use of digital technology for social good and online activism, and is the author of 3 books on social change in a connected world. She's the former chair of the National Board of the NARAL Foundation and past president of the Temple Beth Abraham Synagogue in Tarrytown, New York. And I just want to say that because Allison is a current candidate, I really want to note that both JWI and AIFL are 501c3s, and we don't make political endorsements. So let's begin our conversation. Allison, I'm going to start with you. I know from knowing you for so many years that running for elected office, making a difference through an elected position has been a long-time goal of yours. And now that you have this opportunity, I can't imagine how different it looks. Whatever plans you had have completely changed. And it's a competitive race you're in, where it's critical that all of the candidates get their names and platforms out to their constituents. How has COVID changed the reality of campaigning? How have you drawn on your expertise in social media and networking to change the game of political campaigning?
Well, thank you, Meredith. And thanks to all the organizers. It is such an honor to be included in this august group of women and to be able to share some thoughts today. After 2016, we know, Meredith, the world changed so deeply. And I did not have a plan to run for this seat. But when our legendary U.S. Rep. Nita Lowey announced her retirement, I thought, wow, holy cow, hang on, here's a champion for Israel, a champion for women's rights. And because of my background the last 15 years being a futurist for where we need to go as a society, I feel really deeply and strongly that we need to rebuild our economy and our democracy. I think of this race in 2 parts. There was a first race that was very traditional, that was around fundraising and then petitioning. And as you mentioned, it is a crowded race because it's an open seat. We haven't had one in 32 years here. And we did great in that, first half of the race. Then COVID hit, and I made a strategic decision at the end of February, beginning of March. And that was, not only was my campaign going to be digital, which is actually great news for us, since that it helps to be an architect of the field of online activism in a digital campaign. But I really wanted my campaign to be social, which is actually different from that, in that the traditional markers of campaign strength are polling and fundraising and shoving mailers and TV ads at people, what I call a spray and pray approach to this. It's wildly expensive and wildly inefficient and very, very, very transactional. In this moment in time, a social campaign meets both my values and the needs of the moment. And what that means is we're focused on building on the strong social networks I have in this district. I grew up here, raised 3 kids here, and to encourage friends, to recruit friends for the campaign online and in their neighborhoods as well, through email and whatever mechanisms they have. But it's deeply relational. It's values-based. In what will be a low turnout primary, we think it's not just smart, it's a winning strategy.
It's interesting what you were saying. I think all of us leading organizations are thinking about, we have our established constituency online, those who have already connected. how do you push beyond that? How do you connect with people beyond those who have already connected with you? How do you get your constituents to push out your message and reach more people?
So here's the key difference, and this is what I've been writing about and learning about for the last 15 years. Digital, social, where we are now, is not broadcast because it's intended to be conversational in the way that we're being conversational. But it requires a different kind of leadership to really not just to engage your community, but activate them. That's what we want to do, right? We want people to pick up the tools and the opportunity to engage their network for us. That's what a social network approach is. And to do that, you begin by listening and you begin by asking questions. So it's about using all the different platforms we have here, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you want to be, and making sure that as a leader, you are accessible as a person, not just as a logo, that you're doing more listening than talking, that you're identifying opportunities to solve problems together, and you're acknowledging the contributions of the people in the network as deeply human beings. And so it's deeply human focused. But as you know, and we've talked about this over the years, Meredith, it's a hard pivot. We use the word of the day, pivot, to go from a traditional broadcast risk-averse approach to leadership to one that is social and relational and conversational, but it's what we need to do right now.
It sounds like something we should have done all along. I'm listening to you and thinking it's saving money, it's better for the environment, it's allowing for conversation and engagement. But you use the word risk
values. You know, it really does as community builders. Yeah.
And you use the word risk averse, which is the perfect segue to Elah. Elah, you know, one of the first things that was affected by this virus worldwide was our stock markets. You know, businesses shut down, jobs were lost, people worried about their health, and investors got scared. How did you react? What did you do to right the ship?
Talk to people, just as was just suggested. I guess that's the main thing that we needed to do, was keep communicating with people. You know, I think that basically, if you look at the stock market, what is really striking is the divide between the stock market now and where people are now, where the economy is now. The Economist had this great cartoon a few issues ago of this great divide between Wall Street and Main Street. I think that's really what's striking. But if you want to go back to March, to what happened when the markets really fell, then I would say that our probably three things. One is that we're really lucky it happened now and not 2 or 5 years ago, because the technology is so much better. We were able to move 400 people, but you know, American investment houses were able to move tens of thousands of people to work from home within a week or days. It's really incredible. Think about the cyber needed to do that, and the connectivity needed to do that, and these types of instruments that allow us to continue the conversation even if we can't be in the same office together. So we're really lucky this did not happen 2 or 3 years ago, but happened now. So that's one pretty amazing thing. The other two are really, you know, the messaging to clients is that if you're going out to sea in a storm, if you haven't prepared your boat before, you don't want to do that, or you don't want to be in a storm without your boat being prepared. So really, that's what asset management is all about, is that you know that funds that are in the market are long-term funds, and if you need the money anytime soon, you probably shouldn't be in the market in the first place. So really having balanced portfolios before such events happen is the most critical thing that people have to know. And once you're in that storm, then probably, to quote Bloomberg, one of their podcasts, and you can't win if you're not in, right? So you have to stay in if you want to win this. And if your boat is prepared and you don't need the money for the next year, then as the markets have proven, you're probably best to just stay, buckle up and stay where you are. I just for the perspective of this great divide between Wall Street and Main Street, because that is really, it's pretty incredible that you would have, I think the number of, Allison, please correct me, the number of unemployed in the U.S. is somewhere around 40 million people, so those are incredible numbers. I don't think that you've had such numbers since 1929 or 30. And still the market has been rising. I think it's rising today. So, the main reason for that is just the amount of money that governments have promised to put into the markets. So I think the global money, the global amount that is out there that has been pledged by governments and central banks is somewhere in the range of $22 trillion. 22 trillion, that trillion is 12 zeros after that. That's an incredible amount of money. And the markets with zero interest rates are reacting primarily to that, because that will enter into the economy. That's money that will go to companies and go to strengthen the economy. And people just feel they can't miss out on that. And maybe after that, the economy will be difficult. But currently, that seems like what the markets are reacting to.
I remember I heard early on the advice was treat your stocks like your face and don't touch it.
Okay. That would put a lot of doctors out of business, but...
a question just popped up in the chat, which I know we're not officially turning to yet, but I thought it was interesting. Are you seeing, and again, this makes me think of what Allison was talking about, are people shifting their focus in what they're investing in because of COVID? Is there more an awareness, not only of industries that can survive this kind of pandemic? I know there's a shift to different things that are actually accelerating in this time, but is there more of an awareness of a social good, a greater good, things that are more green or want to create a more responsible type of investing policy?
So unfortunately, if you look at market indexes, not that much, but it does make a lot of sense. And we feel that definitely this is a trend that has been evolving before COVID, and will probably strengthen now that we're in it. Because just, the ESG types of data, I would say, gives you sort of a view inside the company about how it treats its employees. So now that people are coming back to work, companies that have been treating their employees really well and walk them through this crisis will probably have, just better outcomes, because these employees will do a lot better than other companies where people are really angry at their employer, and but also the treatment of the community. So the community ends up being your clients, and also the way, okay, there my English goes. What's that word? Suppliers. Thank you. If you've been really good with your supply chain, and now that things are coming back, and you really need those supplies to move them on to your clients, if you've been a very difficult contractor, probably suppliers will prefer someone else. So it's a very, I think, good screener for where to put your money and which companies will do better than others. And ESG gives you that view, that screening tool to be able to choose or understand which companies behaved which way.
It's fascinating. I never thought about looking and thinking about how a company is treating their employees for actually where I should be investing my money. And I thank you for that. And that, it makes me want to turn to Wendy. As you're in the commercial real estate market, as we're rethinking the workplace, and I want to acknowledge that not everyone has the privilege to be able to work from home. Not everyone has access to the technology, the physical space. There are issues with childcare. What does this all mean for the commercial real estate market? What are you seeing companies are doing, like Elah was saying, not only with their space, but how they're treating their employees and how they're transitioning, both working from home and then possibly coming back?
Well, it's sort of like Allison. We've had to learn to be digital. You'd asked me kind of like, what has changed? The fact that I think it happened like around March 13th, literally they said, go home for the weekend, but none of us went back. And so it happened overnight, and we had this kind of great experiment where we all had to become virtual, and we've all learned how to do it. And people who wanted to work from home finally got the chance, and we've demonstrated that we can do it, but it's not necessarily something we want to do all the time going forward. And sort of like Elah, communication is one of the absolute most important things when we were starting to shut down, while we've been shut down, and as we start to plan, and I emphasize start, the reemergence to the office space. I spent the morning on the call with clients because that's really the biggest thing, is helping them navigate these uncharted waters to think about what will it look like as they start to think to go back. And it's not just them planning for their own employees, it's making sure that they have spoken a lot with the property managers and the owners of the buildings to understand what they're doing. Because if your employees don't feel safe, they don't want to go back. And this is not just you're dealing with the real estate department at a company, you're dealing with legal, you're dealing with HR. All of these different components have to come together and make sure that there's a plan put together. For example, companies that are more open plan in workstations, what we used to call cubicles, are now having to rethink that they can't all come back in. And how are they going to do it? And it's going to be kind of a slow, measured thing. And then what will be, some of the long-term impacts? We're advising people, don't make any rash decisions right now. Obviously, you need to have PPP and things of that sort. But for the most part, you want to kind of wait and see how things transition.
Yeah, I was on a call yesterday with some other women who are CEOs of Jewish organizations, and we were talking about the complexities of it, where maybe only one person is allowed in the elevator at a time, and how long it will just take people to go from the lobby of the building to their office, or dealing with the bathroom spaces. Does this mean people will be lined up outside of the bathroom? So what are you hearing about what people are doing? Because I'm hearing that CEOs are saying, I don't even want to go back to my office. Why do we need it? We're doing fine now. But what have we lost? What are the things we're not thinking of right now? Those water cooler conversations, yes, we might be gathering around a virtual boardroom table, but how is it different than that person-to-person interaction? What are we losing by moving away from a physical workspace?
Well, we've lost culture. And when you think about it, when you're in your office and you walk down the hall and you see people, that opportunity to kind of spark an idea, that collaboration, that ability to come together in that way is something that's lost. Are we able to function and work in this kind of Zoom otherwise environment? Yeah, we've learned how. Before the pandemic, I'd never been on a Zoom call. I've gotten really good at it. But for the most part, we're making it work because we haven't had a choice. And I think in the long term, people do crave to figure out ways to get back, to have that human interaction. The other thing is when you think about, it's really important when companies think about their ability to retain the staff they have as well as future recruitment, you need to look at the different generations. And younger people really miss the buzz of coming together, and that they're going to want to find a way to get back. And so, you talked about companies talking about, well, we don't ever need to go back. I think that's what you're hearing from people right now because they're not back. But we are starting to see, for example, my office in Northern Virginia opened on Monday. We're seeing other offices throughout the country start to, but it's going to be very slow and thoughtful and cautious until there is a vaccine, and we're all very hopeful that there will be one. But we're hearing about people like Facebook and Twitter and others that are pushing it out till the end of the year. A lot of my clients are now at a point where even if the governments allow it, they're not going to even think about going back until Labor Day or later, because we have to think about it's not just me. I'm fortunate that I don't have little children at home, but there's people that do, or that don't have an environment where they can work. And so we have to recognize, as you said, everybody has a different environment. And the other thing that companies are really struggling with is, other than salaries, real estate expenses are typically your second largest expenditure. Well, it's hard for people. They're like, I'm paying all this rent and nobody's there. And so then it makes them think, do I need it? At the end of the day, the answer is yes, they do need it, but it may look different.
And it's fascinating what you're saying about this next generation, the Gen Z. I was looking this at as an opportunity to actually bring in some more remote staff and have them very seamlessly integrate with our workplace. But I also know I'm very fortunate to be sitting in a home where I have space, where it's comfortable, and I have younger staff who are living and working out of their bedroom in a small apartment that they're sharing with many more people than they had originally been sharing the apartment with. So it's interesting. Allison, I want to turn to you. What are you hearing from your constituents that we've lost? What are they missing in terms of traditional engagement with a campaign, the town halls, the parlor room? I was fortunate to attend a meeting in a home with you. What are people missing?
So for real hardcore election people, what they're missing most is the door knocking. You're missing an opportunity to go out and meet with people and tell them about the campaign in person and listen to their stories. And even though we are almost entirely digital now, although I did go out for a very large, wonderful rally for Black Lives Matter locally yesterday. We had hundreds of people here. We are beginning to go out a little bit more. But as you mentioned, we're missing people online, right? We're missing people who don't have access, don't have the equipment, don't have the broadband to be able to engage digitally, or maybe they're older and not comfortable doing this. So it is worrisome how many people we are leaving out right now. And there is, as Wendy said, there is an energy to being together in person. We are social beings. We are meant to be together that we are missing. I did want to raise one piece, though, in reference to the conversation you just had with Wendy, though, and this is what I'm hearing from a lot of constituents, Meredith, which is, and we're in Westchester County. We are the epicenter of the COVID virus, right? So we've been shut down for a long time here. People are anxious. They're scared. As Ella said, we're unemployed here. However, with the first phase of reopening, opening up more essential businesses, manufacturers, parents, particularly women, are now being put in the position, many of them, of having to choose between work and taking care of their kids, because there has been so little conversation and focus on what to do with your kids with schools, camps, daycare centers closed now that you have to go back to work. And I'm a mom of 3 kids. This is just, hurts my heart to hear. And one of my biggest fears is that parents are going to be left, too many parents are going to leave their 8, 9, 10-year-olds home alone right now. And this is, I think, a function of not having enough women at enough tables to raise an issue of childcare first, not last.
I think you're right. There was an excellent article in the Atlantic, and we've been hearing about how gendered the effect of this virus is, not only in the large percentage of women who are essential workers, but who in a household is going to step back from her work in order to take care of children or an adult, and what are the long-term effects of that on women and the advancements that we've made. How much are we going to be set back because of this? Elah, Israel is ahead of us in the U.S. on this. Can you tell us what it's like on the ground there? What can we look forward to maybe in the next couple of weeks from what you're seeing with what Israel has done?
Traffic is returning. I'm sure you don't miss that. But really, the issue of schools has been center here as well, primarily because schools reopened, and at least 2 schools had to close because over 100 kids got infected, and everyone in that specific community had to stay home. So it's still very contained, because if it's just a school and the families that are connected with the schools, they didn't have to shut too many things up. But definitely the issue of solutions for how to get the kids back into the educational system is a major issue, and I don't know any place in the world that figured this out. So unfortunately, what apparently needs to be done is that dads stay home and take care of the kids. I think that's the solution.
Good answer. Well done.
Definitely. But, you know, everyone, once we started 2 weeks ago to get back to work, and what happened was that in the beginning people were very cautious, but then we don't even wear masks anymore. I mean, we're Israeli, right? It's very, very difficult the way we're functioning around this, but it seems that people are not getting reinfected, not here, not in Europe. So yes, we can be slightly optimistic. You should though remember that Israel is very small, 8 million people, not even a large city in the U.S. So that's also something that should be taken into consideration.
Ellen, just to let you know, we just lost your video, so I don't know what you can do. That's okay. Allison, what are you hearing about schools reopening? I'm sure you're in meetings around that.
Are you aiming for me or for Wendy?
I was actually talking to Allison, although Wendy, you can also, but just talking about the schools, I'm assuming you're in meetings with your local school board, education, about the plans, and again, just thinking about what Ella was saying about the challenges of opening schools in particular.
K through 12 elementary schools here are closed until September, and they're working as hard as they can to try to figure out a plan to re-engage kids then. The Governor Cuomo just announced yesterday that day camps will begin to open at the end of the month. So that will alleviate some of the pressure from parents. But as you know, Meredith, so many of the Jewish summer camps closed for the summer, which is heartbreaking for the kids, for everybody involved. The very complicated question is what happens with colleges and higher ed. My youngest son goes to Vassar, and we're not quite sure how that's going to work in the fall. They're looking at staggered start times for kids, but once they go on campus, they have to stay there. It's enormously complicated, and I know the administrations are working very, very hard, but there is no easy answer to how to re-engage socially with a virus without a vaccine.
I know that's where I'm looking to Israel for you all to find. My hope is with Israel to find the vaccine. I have to say, you know, Wendy and I really want to turn to all three of you before we open it up to questions from our listeners. Is I know none of us has a crystal ball, but from each of your unique perspectives, what positive changes have occurred? What do you hope is going to remain from all of these pivots and adaptions and innovations? And what brings you hope? I don't know, Wendy, if you want to kick it off.
So if you all remember back in 2017, there was a BBC reporting, and they interviewed, I believe it was a professor in South Korea. And he was very proper in English and on the phone, and all of a sudden on the video, his toddler came rushing in.
Yes.
And the internet exploded.
Yeah.
And I think that is emblematic of where we've come from. And people are so much more accepting and so much more flexible than they've ever been. I mean, I put a background on because my office is a bit of a mess today. But in general, we're inviting complete strangers into our homes all the time. And I feel that we have, you know, when people's kids come in or there's a dog barking, you know, in the past I would be like looking for my mute button. People are much more relaxed about that. I think that it's just kind of created this culture of empathy and understanding. Obviously, the environmental benefits, we've demonstrated that with just a short period of time, there are opportunities. It's not too late to reverse some of the climate change, and I'm hoping that that sticks. And the fact that we've learned to adapt quickly and look for opportunities from disruption. Disruption's not always bad, and I think that my industry in general will emerge different, but I think potentially better. And that the whole work from home piece is a really big thing, because so many of my clients did not have robust work from home policies for their employees and were really opposed to it. And guess what? We as I said, we've proven that it works. Now, going back, I think that you'll find people will really ultimately be seeking more of a hybrid. And I'm hoping that companies will recognize that and accept it, particularly for working moms. That really, I mean, working fathers too, or just people in general that want to be home, have appointments, things happening in the house. But in general, that for women, it does make it a lot easier. And I'm hoping that there'll be some flexibility for some period of any given work week that we can do some of that.
That was a great answer, Wendy. That was terrific. I love that. I love that. And if I could just add to it a little bit, Meredith, there were areas where we've had the technology for a long time. So, you know, working from home or telemedicine, where there was social resistance, just cultural resistance to it that we've broken through now. And hopefully we can keep those things moving forward. It is absolutely possible to work remotely and have your business thrive in that kind of environment, or give people more flexibility, parents, for working at home versus, you know, working in an office. And what an enormous boon to health to enable people to stay safely in their homes and consult with a physician or a physician's assistant. And that's a huge benefit for the country.
I agree with all of this, from, you know, the hopefulness I get when we're in a meeting, we're talking about something so serious and heartbreaking, then someone's little baby just gets up on the screen and smiles.
I know. We can be fully human right now in a way we never have been.
Exactly. And the way we're connecting, whether it's, you know, friends in LA who I always think, oh, you know, the couple times I'm out in LA, maybe we'll get together, but why haven't we Zoomed all these years? Or the conversation we're having now with women in Israel and women in the U.S. And it's so simple. And why didn't we do it?
Family Shabbat by Zoom every Friday night with family around the country. And it's lovely. And I hope we keep it.
Elah, what about you? What gives you hope?
You know, $22 trillion that if they're invested right, I mean, they're invested in home medicine, as has been suggested here, and in better communication infrastructure, and better care for people, in water, in electricity, and alternative sources of energy to keep this green environment. There are just so many positive things we could invest in, and there's all this money looking to be invested. So that makes me very optimistic.
You know, at JWI, we talk a lot about financial literacy for women. I know that this is something that you did with your advisor fund. Is there any advice you would give specifically to women now, women of all ages, young women, women approaching retirement who are particularly concerned right now?
So, you know, the way I think about it here in Israel is that, you know, we've had the right for money basically since the country was founded. I mean, in the States, women have the right to own their own money. You know, when I was born, and my mother was a young woman, she needed her husband's signature to open a bank account in the U.S. So just to put things in perspective, we've basically, as adults, we've had the right for money forever, but we've never really been accountable for it. You know, we took the positive and let someone else handle the negative of this. And really, if we want to sit around the table, if we want to be part of the conversation, we have to be accountable, and we have to take the responsibility along with the rights. And that's something that people find many ways to avoid. We're very good at avoiding things that we really don't like to do, our extra chores. So really, you just have to learn how to do it, and it takes training, and it takes being in the conversation, reading the financial news, not only the other sections of the newspapers, and really experiencing it. Because if you don't experience the markets, you end up making many mistakes. So we just try to get women in the conversation, in groups of women where they're more comfortable. Men are not excluded. If they want to come to any of the meetings, they're invited. But we invite women. So we don't close the door, but we turn to women to join these conversations. And we try to bring primarily women speakers on all issues, which is not as challenging as men would have you think.
Mm-hmm. Bravo. I want to turn to some of the questions we're starting to get both on Facebook and in the chat. Someone in Israel was concerned about the mixed use of mask wearing, even though the Ministry of Health has mandated mask use. What do you think? And I can really open this to all of you. What does that look like for public health? And we're seeing that in the U.S. too. The how politicized mask wearing has become, the tension between whether you wear a mask or not. What does that mean long term? I don't know. It's not an easy question to answer. I don't know. But how do we, maybe how do we?
We're not.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying we're not healthcare professionals, so I'm not sure we're the right people to ask. But it seems that countries where they were very good about wearing their masks, like South Korea, have overcome this in much easier ways than we have. It's really uncomfortable, I have to say, and but it's obviously needed. So if we can be diligent about it, we will probably profit from it.
I can tell you that from the office standpoint, anyone, at least that I'm aware of that's going back, is requiring people to be wearing masks coming into the building within the space, unless you're in a private office, which not everyone has the luxury of. And I'm not sure which one of you said it, but it is hard. It's hard to have a conversation with it. It's hard to breathe with it. It's not ideal, but I think it's going to be a key to kind of help us start that transition back. And the real question is enforcement. How are they really going to enforce that? So.
Yeah, I know it makes me feel better when I go out to we've been going to the supermarket once a week, and to see, at least from what I'm seeing, how quickly everyone is now just wearing masks and to me, it's a sign of respect for others, because I understand the masks don't protect you. It protects you spreading potentially the virus to others. And I appreciate when I'm seeing people wearing masks. Allison, I wonder if you can talk about mass transit. I'm putting this on you as somebody who might know. I know I personally have been concerned about, I used to always commute to work on our metro. I'm hesitant to go on that. And yet for the environment, for the public good, mass transit is a positive. What are we doing to keep that safe, to message around making people feel safe going back on? And what does it mean for women? Mass transit.
So this is one of the difficulties, like with schools, of reopening, is that we have to not only have an enormous investment in planning and in making our public spaces safe for everybody. And I know in New York City, they're using some robots to irradiate and clean subway cars. But there's also a huge financial impact for lower income women of color who need to get to work and need to take mass transit. And this is a function of building a more equitable society, Meredith, right? Is that we are paying attention to the needs of everybody in it. And, in a lot of ways over the last 3.5 years, that hasn't happened so much. So certainly for places like DC, New York, mass transit is critical to making sure that we're building trust that we're doing a good job of getting them ready for people, right? And we need to also just increase trust in government in general. In addition, though, in places that are less dense, like here in Westchester County, where I live, I think there's a future for much smaller, agile public transport, electric trolleys to be taking people around, that there's now an opportunity with all the money Ella was talking about for investment to invest in the next generation of vehicles that are electric, that are for public use as well. So anywhere we can look for opportunities to move us to technologies and communal services that are green, that are public, and that are equitable in their distribution, I think we ought to.
That reminds me of something we saw at one of our last visits in Israel, was at the Perez Center, and they were showing us charging plates that were going to be embedded in Israel on the roads, so that electric cars, just as they drive, would recharge. Which is amazing. There are opportunities. People are asking to invest in Israeli companies that are doing critical research now, whether it's around a vaccine for the virus, medicines for the virus, or things that are going to continue, as Wendy was pointing out, the incredible environmental changes that we're now seeing because we're not on the roads. Oh, Ella, that was for you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. The question was about investing in Israeli companies that are making a difference right now, whether it's on cures for the virus or some of these positive changes that we're seeing in the environment.
There are some really incredible startups that are doing a really wide range of things, starting from medical solutions, both for home medicine, vaccines, very, very rapid testing for serum testing for people that have had the virus and are better now. So there's a range of companies along those lines, and then there's also a range of companies that are doing really incredible things on the environmental side, such as storage solutions for energy. There's a company that's actually going to start a pilot in New York for one of their systems that basically stores energy. So you can use solar energy or wind energy or anything that's not 24/7 for longer periods of time, and so are less reliant on fossil fuel. So, you know, we like to disrupt the status quo. We don't like things that are too orderly, and so we keep looking for things that are out there that no one else is doing. So I guess that's just part of what we do. So we're not very good at growing companies into being very long-term global corporates. When we have such companies, they end up being based in the U.S. and possibly having their R&D in Israel, but we're really good at bringing in many, many new, really incredible ideas. So there are lots of things happening here, and happy to talk about them forever if you want me to go on. So
that's that Israeli innovation and what do they say, the chutzpah. Allison, you're having an interesting conversation in the chat room about telemedicine around abortion care. Yeah. Can you share that conversation with everyone? Telemedicine for women's health, and then if you'd like abortion in particular.
Thank you. So as you know, Meredith, I became chair of the National Board of NARAL while we were watching the Kavanaugh hearings. So I picked up the gavel, everybody around the boardroom is crying, and now it's my turn to do what my mother and grandmother did, which is to fight for every woman's right to be safe, healthy, and prosperous. One of the fact is that for several years now, medication has been available, and it's actually available over the counter in Mexico for women to be able to stay home and safely have an abortion. And it works safely for over 90% of women. We have a political problem that we continue to parade women through protesters into clinics for the most private and fundamental health care that she could be doing in her home. That's a political problem. That's not a health problem. So through telemedicine, a woman can consult with a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant, get the prescription to the medication, and stay at home. The problem is too many doctor's offices don't want to prescribe, and too many pharmacies don't want to give the medication here. It's FDA approved already. So this is where and how we need, frankly, more women elected who are going to be champions for women's fundamental freedom. And we need women up and down the ballot, because this is increasingly a state issue. It is, we are post-Roe in most states. 90% of women don't have access to a health clinic within, in their county, in the country. And we know that this is also an economic issue, because if you don't control your body, you don't control your financial future. So it's possible. We just need to build the political power to make it happen.
Thank you. And then final question, Wendy, what are you seeing with women who are leading their workplaces? This is the topic of the webinar today. We were talking about now, you were saying that people are now seeing that we can have flexible workspaces, how that can help parents, how that can help working women. What are you seeing from the clients you're working with? And especially not to say there's a difference in the men and the women, but what are you hearing from the women who you're working with about how they're looking at the emotional health of their employees, are guiding their workplaces through this uncertain time?
It really does go back to kind of the communication. And while women in general are ones that typically I would think would be spearheading this, I must admit, for my own company, I have been blown away from the leadership at the top, which does have a lot of men, although I'm really proud we have a number of women on the board now and in leadership positions, have been really open and flexible and supportive. And for example, one of the things is everyone's starting to think about this return to work. There is no mandate that you must return until you feel safe. And it's not just a legal liability. I feel it's compassion. And there's been more understanding about how people have different things that they need to do, whether, they may be more available in the morning or the afternoon. And I think from that standpoint, that flexibility that I've seen come from these companies is really important, because we're struggling. I mean, I wouldn't say this, like I said repeatedly, we've made this work because we had to, but it's not ideal. I feel like we're a bunch of silos and we're isolated, and it make you look at the screen when we're on Zoom and we're all in our own little boxes, and it's hard to cross over. So feeling that your company is supportive and recognizes the challenge that you're having and they want to ease your transition back has really given me some faith and made me feel good about it, and that we really have open dialogues in ways we never had before. I've had so many clients who were emphatic that they were not going to support people having any remote work. And their arguments, we've shot holes in all of them. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to capture that and move that as we look backwards and say, this is why it works, and this is why you need to be more flexible. Because for anybody, having that flexibility to work from home can be a game changer. I just don't want to do it all the time.
Yes, that's right.
Although I have not missed my very long commute. And I thank you, Wendy, for also recognizing all the men who are stepping up and are serving as allies and are doing.
They really are. And I want to thank you all for giving me an opportunity. I think it's been like 4 times the last 3 months to put on makeup.
Well, I want to thank you all for being on this panel, to AIFL for opening up this incredible conversation, to all of you who have spent the past hour with us listening and engaging, and I thank you all. And at this point, Ruby, I'd like to turn things back over to you.
Thank you for this inspiring discussion. This was a great beginning to our series, and we plan to do more webinars in the near future and over the summer. We hope we all enjoyed this webinar. And we invite you to join our webinars, AFL's webinars, on Wednesdays and Sundays every week through the summer. And I hope you will enjoy them all. So have a good summer and stay healthy. And we will see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Very much.